Welcome, Wargamers. Today we're going on an adventure to a new world that I'm excited to dive into, and that is the world of Wild West Exodus, a fantastic game by Warcradle Studios. And in this video, we're going to do kind of my broad introductions to the universe, right? The goal for this video and the next one is to kind of set the stage before we meet the actors that are going to be upon it, meaning, the individual factions and characters within them. This has been requested by many viewers over the last few months, and I'm excited to jump into it. But Wild West Exodus is different than the other games that I cover here on the channel. Rather than being pure a fantasy setting like Age of Sigmar or Warcry or something like that, or a vision of our future like Necromunda or Infinity, because technically Necromunda is our future, it's just way different and bleak compared to Infinity. This game is about an alternate history, where malign forces and strange technology and good old-fashioned greed have shaped the world in unimaginable ways, charting a new course of destructive weaponry, dark biological manipulation, and power sources that mankind was simply not ready for. Now, this is collectively known, the setting, as the dystopian age, and in this video we're going to learn a bit about it. Understand, this video is going to be covering more of the human side of things, how we know the divergence from, our normal history as we know it to this fictional universe, and the next video is going to be somewhat darker. I'm going to use the term wiggity when it comes to the dark stuff. If you don't know, Wild West Exodus has a very human Wild West theme to it, but it also has this kind of cosmic horror, Cthulhu-esque type thing. And so we're going to save the dark cosmic horror stuff for tomorrow. Today we're going to talk about the human Wild West element. Now, there isn't an exact time and date for the divergence, meaning the point where our history as we know it in the real world diverges onto this new path. But we know it took place in the early 1800s with the discovery of some alien technology that crashed to Earth in the same style as a meteor. We'll get into the details of that discovery and who discovered it and the various factions, and we'll review and that kind of stuff I'll be doing in the future. But this one discovery led to more. In fact, it led to us discovering an entire vault of alien technology hidden away in Antarctica. And one thing became very clear. Whoever made this stuff had a plan for humanity. That we as a species were being cultivated and guided along a path. And while we weren't supposed to find, technology of this level yet, the human mind grasped it astonishingly quick, and we were able to reverse engineer things far previous to when we should have. By the mid-1800s, a new scientific revolution had begun, a renaissance of the human race that had been unequaled throughout history. New elements were discovered, the atom was understood, strange, almost arcane mechanisms were being created, and the power bases were all scrambling to keep up with this new scientific race. The governmental systems and alliances and pacts were simply not ready for anything of this, right? A change of this magnitude. Alright, so we're going to step out of the Wild West Exodus universe for a bit and talk about our own history, which of course this is loosely based upon. This is the kind of thing we saw later in our real world in World War I, where these alliances and big deals of big and small nations eventually became a powder keg, and the spark that set it all on fire was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. But when that match was struck, all hell broke loose, partly because of this super messy political system that Europe had gotten itself into, but also because this is the turning point in human history where technology became the true center stage of warfare. We had cavalry and guns and etc., but the lull between inventions like the Maxim gun and artillery, and that could fire rounds the size of small cars, well, those things were invented, but they hadn't been tested in true total war. Now, I bring all this up because, one, I'm a huge history nerd, but this fictional event of finding this technology, reverse engineering it, and unlocking these huge technological strides, bigger than anything we had in World War I, and doing so roughly 100 years earlier, this is why I love these alternate history things, right? Like the Fallout series, Wild West Exodus, and a few others, because we can see things panning out. We've jumped a new, level for our race, and we weren't quite prepared for it. Now this gold rush for new weapons and science and power sources and more is happening globally, and this is an arms race that no nation can afford to sleep through. But no place is this more fascinating than the American West. And I say that for a few reasons. This is a developing area, making it a blank slate for barons, religions, and scientists to carve out a place for themselves, right? Think the world of tomorrow, but with this boom, everyone can build their own vision of what tomorrow means. It's attached to an established nation, meaning the United States of the government. And even though the Civil War of the US was ending and things were rocky during the rebuilding period, the Wild West had trains leading out to it, supply lines, some of the greatest inventors of the day existed at this time, and the lawless towns that allowed them to do whatever the heck they wanted. But having this big expanse coupled with a nation of established supply lines is huge, right? Infrastructure is what I'm getting at. That you could say, I'm going to go to America. Let's say you're in Europe. I'm going to go to America, carve out a place for myself in the West. You can come to America on a ship, and all of a sudden there's trains, all this kind of stuff. If you have the money to go out, bring that stuff to the middle of nowhere and build a city. It's all there ready for you. Additionally, characters defined the West, right? Some of the most cunning minds to exist in American history are in this time period. We have wealthy monopoly barons wielding control over colossal work camps, notorious outlaw bandits, dastardly anti-heroes, voices of both war and reason from indigenous tribes across the US. It's a melting pot of ideas and ideologies and technology and space that you can shape with any combination. The American West in this time was deeply fascinating in the real world, but changing that to include huge technological booms and a distinct lack of morals regarding scientific discovery, crime, lawlessness, and it's the burgeoning federal government, while the nation is in recovery, make this an incredibly interesting time and setting. It's a perfect snapshot of what's going on all over the world, but here on the fringes, this technology is meeting, the rugged, salt-of-the-earth people with wealthy capitalists and rogue scientists. And so this is the dystopian age, a time of drastic evolution of mankind that, quite frankly, we really weren't ready for, where nations band together to fight for precious resources and power. They almost formed 7 complete power bases across the globe, and the Wild West is simply one snapshot of seeing these changes happen in real time. Now, why is this cool? Why have I fallen in love with Wild West Exodus? Well, I hope my history nerd has sufficiently shown through this episode. This is an incredible time in history in the real world, but then adding this layer of fantasy on top is so exciting. Part of it is this sort of carries in through the game, right? Everyone is a dark entity. Being a lawman only kinds of means you're good-ish, outlaws run wild, captains of industry are abusing workers into indentured servitude with company stores, the US government is committing atrocities against the Native American tribes. It's just all bad. And this influx of power and science only raises the stakes. And in this kind of alternate history, it asks some really fun questions like, what if Nikola Tesla had this level of technology? The answer is he'd make a suit of power armor that fries people with lightning. How does the Union Army rebuild America? Well, it becomes a militaristic police state on the East with unprecedented power and funding. Now, we'll talk a lot more about the state of the US and the world as we explore the various factions' lores, because they're global, but they all converge in the American West, so it does talk about the rest of the world. And I invite you to come along with me. It's just so fun to imagine the greatest characters in US history as these alternate versions, right? You got Jesse James, Wyatt Earp, Tesla, Edison, Abraham Lincoln, General Grant, and so many more. Each of them has seen the world changing, and through their bravery, their cunning, their guile or strength, have forged this nation anew with all kinds of eccentric and wild and ridiculous things. It maintains the rugged Western feel, because technology hasn't fully reached out there yet. It takes time for tech to disseminate globally. And you have to think about the fact that everyone, at some point in the world, had their first time seeing a car. Right? Imagine that when Ford rolled out the first Model T, there's a bunch of people walking around with their horses going like, what the heck is that? Right? They have no concept because there's nothing existed like it before. So stories become very interesting when they're based on this dichotomy of high-level sci-fi but low-tech Western themes. And one thing I really want to end on, and this is a note that I was watching videos where the designers were talking to another content creator, and they kept saying the same thing over and over again, which is that this is an optimistic setting. And, you know, all the other games, they tend to be very, very, you know, grimdark, so to speak. Infinity is kind of different because it's not quite, you know, corporate evil necessarily. But Wild West Exodus is interesting because all these factions coming from around the world converging on the American West. The point of them doing that is because they want to craft a better world. The problem is that their versions of a better world just conflict with one another, but ultimately, all of them are trying to do good at different moral capacities that we'll get into. As opposed to things like in 40K where, you know, there's a militaristic, you have to worship the emperor, you know, anything that you say that's contrary to that is like sedition and you'll be executed as a heretic. It's not like that. This is a bunch of people trying to do good, but what the definition of good looks like in this rapidly changing world that we weren't ready for looks super different to these different factions. And I like that. I get behind that because then you have villains with very clear and understandable and almost relatable motivations based on their worldview. At the same time, if you reverse that image, you're the bad guy, right? But maybe your understanding is also completely relatable. Everyone's trying to lay out their, you know, their plans for a new humanity. And what we're seeing in the West is it's sort of like the birth pains of what the next level of humanity can look like, right? Who's going to win can shape the nature of what the next stage in human evolution looks like. So it has some high stakes, but also everyone's trying to do good by their own definition. And if this interests you at all, frankly, I'm going to be super honest with you, it's a cheap game compared to Games Workshop. The models look amazing, the rules and the lore are free online. Go ahead and have a check it out. But I'm excited to start jumping into this. You'll certainly see a bit of it online because I love painting the models. And this is a game that since I discovered it, I was like, man, there's just not enough people talking about it because it's so stinking cool. So friends, thank you so much for watching this video. I really do hope that you will you'll tune in and follow along with me. And if you are a fan of Wild West Exodus and you are watching this channel, please do me a huge favor and share this video somewhere so I can, you know, kind of get more in touch with that fan base and keep making videos that people enjoy. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. I look forward to seeing you in my next lore video. Happy wargaming. Hey everybody, I hope you enjoyed that video. It was made possible by the folks over here to the left. These are my top supporters over here on YouTube and on Patreon that keep this channel going. If you'd like to learn more about how to become a supporter and get some cool things in the process, like exclusive pictures and interactions with me and get your questions answered here on the channel, go ahead and click any of the links down below or the join button on the community page over on YouTube. Regardless of your choice, I wanted to thank you so much for joining me with this video, and I look forward to seeing you in my next one. Happy wargaming.